Okay, I've hit record. Okay, welcome back, everyone. So I have the great pleasure of introducing our next speaker who's showcasing Portugal. Sandie Mourão has lived in Portugal since 1987. She is a teacher educator, author, and educational consultant specializing in early years ELT with special interests in play, picture books, assessment, and classroom-based research. We're so lucky to have you here. Welcome, and over to you, Sandie.
Thanks, Joan. I'm very honoured to be invited to speak and to represent Portugal. And thank you very much to the YLTSIG for the amazing work that they're doing, just promoting good practices and just making the young learner and teenager world become a much bigger and better place to be. So thank you for that. And a special thank you to the technical staff, so Heike and whose face popped up I saw earlier. So thank you for your, never-ending hours helping everyone to do their best. That's really good. And Sinem as well, who's been in touch with me by email. So thank you for that. So yes, I'm here to talk about one of my passions, and that's teaching English in the early years. So that's for children. Oh, thank you, Elena. There's someone in the chat box just said Dexter Dino is our favourite course. That's great. um, so I'm here to talk about teaching English in the early years, and one aspect of it in particular. So the early years for me is 3 to 6, so it's pre-primary children from 3 to 6. I've noticed that there are a couple of participants who have children from the age of, who teach children from the age of 2. English is being introduced ever earlier. So this is what I'm going to be talking about. Just mention very briefly the European guidelines because I'm representing Portugal. And then we're going to talk about play and think about what a learning area is, and then in particular what an English learning area is, and then some ideas and some examples and some ideas of how to manage an English learning area, which we affectionately call ELLAs, and then some questions. I've tried to keep it fairly short. I think I can probably fit it into the 20 minutes, which I've been asked to stick to. You want me to speak up? I'll just turn my. Is that better? Can you hear me better now? Omar? Is that better? Hmm? Okay, great. Thank you. Um, yes, and hopefully some questions. This is a topic which is um, fairly innovative in the sense that it's not something which is happening in many institutions. So I hope we get lots of nice questions at the end. So European guidelines then. We have a document which is written by the European Commission which talks a little bit about what is expected within language learning and in a European context. And so one of the main bits, I think, is that children should be exposed to the target language, that's English in our case, in meaningful and, if possible, authentic settings, and in such a way that the language is spontaneously acquired rather than consciously learnt. What's key there is the authentic setting and the spontaneity of language learning rather than thinking of it as being a taught language which focuses on language only. Luciana mentioned in her talk the relevance of educating the whole child, and that's exactly what we do in pre-primary education. And what is authentic about early years and pre-primary education in particular is that learning is through play. And so what is play? Well, it's a child's work, and it's a means whereby he grows and develops. This was actually written by Susan Isaacs, who was a pedagogue at the beginning of the last century in the UK. And in fact, Bruner also talks about play and says that it's not actually an activity, but it's an approach to activity. and it's a very important part of educating children. Play is hugely relevant, and as Bruno said, an approach which needs to be taken very seriously. Play is how children learn. So we need to ensure that play is very much part of our early years um, English planning. So how then does play distinguish itself from other activities? How do we know when we're really taking play seriously? Well, if a child is playing, then they have chosen to do what they want to do. And therefore, because they have chosen to do what they want to do, they have control over it. So it's not something which an adult has said, go and do this or go and do that. But a child has decided to, for example, take a box and turn it into a car and sit in it and pretend to drive. Now, because that child has chosen to take the box and sit in it and drive it like a car, they're hugely motivated because it's their idea of what they want to do. Play, therefore, also involves imagination. And as in my example, I've just used a box. It's a cardboard box, but it's become, in the child's imagination, it's a car on a road, on a motorway. Pretense, of course, the pretense of being a driver because children cannot drive. And symbolism. The box is symbolizing the car, and the child is driving it. So play involves being in a what if and as if mode. And play, real play, is not something which adults actually are often involved in. It's very much a child-led activity. Um, So if we were to look then at a kind of, I mean, there are many types of play, and in 20 minutes I can't talk about all those types of play, but what I'm most interested in is the play which is what is called child-initiated play, play which children have decided they want to engage in. So you can see these are examples of children in child-initiated play. Now these come from mainstream um, school context, not foreign language context. Foreign language I see as being a low exposure context with maybe less than 2 hours a week of English. But these children are children in an early years setting, and the children on our left are playing with blocks and they're playing with scarves. They're deciding what they're doing, and the children on the right there are sitting in boxes. Maybe they've turned it into a train. Yes, in fact, look, if you look in the back, there's a picture there and it says train station. So they are role playing, being at a train station with boxes. So these are examples of child initiated play. And within early years, there is the necessity to have a balance between play that we've just seen there, child initiated play, and adult led play. So that's play which is possibly more play-like activity as opposed to actual play, because we're very much involved. We are just deciding what it is the children do in a play-like way. It's not child-initiated play, and we need to have a balance of this in our educational settings. And unfortunately, even in mainstream education, it's difficult to get that balance, and it's extremely difficult in foreign language education. And we'll look at the reasons for that soon. So that's play. I don't know if anyone's got any questions about play. We've got Yasir who says that you conduct research on the contents of play. Is that what you mean? I don't know if anyone's got any questions about play or any comments. Type in the chat box. Okay, Rebecca is typing something. Just talked about it very briefly. Absolutely, Rebecca. Thank you very much. Yes, Rebecca has said people often say play when they mean adult-led game. Yes, and often play is seen as a very negative thing as well. Or we might say something like "stop playing around." That's a negative thing, a negative view of play. When in actual fact, it's a very important thing. Yeah, Heiki, typing something. Oh, lovely. So your latest EU-funded project, Heike, is about gameplay. Lovely. And is it, but it's not in the early years though, probably. We're not with Minecraft. But play is extremely important. Yeah, absolutely. And language play, of course, is also very relevant. Okay, I'm going to move on. Heike's typing, but I'll read her. Yeah, okay, it's from about 8 years. That's right. Yeah, okay. So this is a classroom in a Western European, a European context. And we can see here lots of learning areas. So learning areas are spaces which focus on a particular developmental area within early years education. So there's dressing up there. I don't know if you can you see the dressing up area? Can you see the small world play? Can you see the computers and writing area? Can you see the wooden toys table? Can you see a reading corner? Can you see a shop role play? Have a look and see if you can find those things. These are all areas in early years which are set up deliberately to develop a particular skill or concept within early years education. So and if you didn't find them, here they are. So the wooden toys area is developing fine motor skills, but also cognitive development for puzzles and things like that. The small world play are little miniature versions of the real world. So you might have a small farm set or a little family house set, that kind of thing. That's small world play. And those are for children to reenact um, um, and do mini dramatizations of in these particular areas. Your dressing up, of course, is your role play. And there's a nice little dressing up corner. Computers and writing, in the sense not necessarily writing as we would write, but early writing experiments that the children would be doing there. There's a lovely reading corner with a nice box of books and cushions for children to sit on. And there's a role play shop area there that you can see where the children they've got a pretend a till, and they've got shopping baskets on the side there. So this is a very typical European pre-primary classroom with areas. Learning areas are set up, as I said, to help children develop particular areas. They are normally set up by the teacher or the educator who is teaching them and being with them. But she will follow, or he will follow, the children's interests and set up areas that she feels they will enjoy and they will be happy to play in. So in this particular classroom, you might have had a group of children who were interested in shopping, and this is why she has set up a shopping area. So this idea of areas then is very typical in our European education, and in particular in Portugal. And what it's about is about helping children to become responsible young beings, and they're allowed to choose where it is they want to play. And when they play in these areas, they experiment, they make mistakes, and they decide for themselves what it is they want to do. They engage in child-initiated play, and they are autonomous in doing that. And it's extremely important part of early childhood education. So in English, often, although not always, but often, a teacher will come into a classroom within a school and teach children English, and then she or he will leave the classroom again. I call that a parachute English teacher, because they tend to just arrive, do their bit, and leave. Or children might visit a language school, a language institute, which focuses on teaching children or learners of all age, which also include children. So once again, the children sort of come to the school, they focus on learning English, and then they leave the school. And there's no actual connection really to their learning. I don't know if either of those contexts seems seems like your context. Yes, I mean, Jennifer and Sandra have both agreed that they belong to the parachute model. I belong to the parachute model. And in fact, in Portugal, we did a small piece of research a couple of years ago, and that is, the main model. About 75% of the teachers who teach in a pre-primary context are parachute teachers. They arrive in the school, they give their 30 minutes or 45 minutes a week maybe, or an hour a week of English, and then they leave. And this is pretty much the same all around Europe, yeah. So, and normally what we do is we focus on circle time, sitting around a carpet, and table time, where we might do some arts and crafts activities. So what we've decided to do in some of the schools that I work with, and in fact increasingly more schools in Portugal, is we set up an English learning area. Now this area um, it remains in the children's room in their preschool. So if they're in a preschool, so this is one model in a preschool which has a parachute teacher. So what happens is when the English teacher goes away, the English learning area remains in the classroom and is one of many areas that the children can choose to play in. Okay, that's right, Aki, the Ella. Okay, so let me just go back again. So the English teacher will do her bit or his bit, and then there will also be an Ella, a learning area in the classroom, which will remain there when the teacher leaves the classroom. So what is common in and what links the teacher coming in and doing English and the learning area are the resources. So everything that the English teacher brings, he or she leaves it in the learning area. Or if she doesn't leave something exactly the same, she leaves something which will do the same thing with the children, which will prompt them to use English. So resources which the children associate with English will be left in the English learning area. And children will therefore play with those resources. So what happens then is that we're seeing that during circle time, we have adult-led directed play or play-like activities. So it's kind of like formal instruction. The teacher is focusing on the language that the children, she wants the children to learn, or that has been agreed, and the activities, the singing and the storytelling and the game-like activities that she plays with them. And there will be whole class interaction with the teacher and the children, and there'll be interaction between teacher and peers, sorry. And then when the teacher goes away, the children are given an opportunity to engage with English, but without the teacher, on their own free will. It's their choice to go and play in the learning area. So this is child-initiated free play, and it's what we would call informal instruction. Vygotsky has this differentiation between formal instruction, which is teacher-led, adult-led, and informal instruction, which comes from interacting with your peers. And so it's about interacting with peers and pair and small group interaction. And so what happens is that the teacher, during the adult-led directed play, she's a sort of mediator between the resource, the language, and the children. And in the learning area, she is a planner because she has to plan for the activities to be and the resources to be there for the children to engage with them. Exactly, Paula. An English learning area, Paula Mida has just said, to exploit the language. That's exactly what the children do in a learning area. They exploit it. So this is actually an example of an Ella in Italy, not in Portugal, in Italy, but it's one of my favorites. It was sent to me 12 years ago now, and I did some training for several years on the trot in Norwich, in Nile, and Nile in Norwich Institute of Language Teaching. And I trained pre-primary teachers in Italy, and they went back to Italy and they set up Ella's English learning areas. And so we've got some photos here of the English learning area and the children playing. And you can see that they're playing all sorts of different things there. There's playing a bingo, they're playing with a puppet and saying a rhyme, and they are playing with cards, and they are speaking in English together. These are very old Ellas in Portugal, when I first began back in the late 90s, and I like them because they mean a lot to me because they were the first. But you can see that they are little spaces, they're shelves, they've got lots and lots of resources that children can access, and then take the resources and play with them. In the picture on the right, they do speak English, yes, Heike. They on the one on the right, this is actually a pre-primary teacher, not an English teacher, who taught English, and she uses all sorts of different ways of keeping all the flashcards and the games and the story sequencing cards together so that children can. Oh, Vanda Louise, absolutely, that was Trindad Zella. Yes, it was. Trindad was a lovely, lovely pre-primary teacher back in 1999 that I worked with, and this was her Ella. Okay, so here are children actually now in the 20th century, 21st century, sorry, these are children that I've worked with, and they're all playing with different resources in an English learning area in a school that I work in. So we can see the children playing games that we would recognize their noughts and crosses, bingo, there's a board game here in the middle row, the second one from the left. Children are reading stories, children are pretending to be teachers, reading stories to their friends. We've got children dressing up. There's the children in the bottom corner there. She's dressing up as a snowman, although she's actually sitting down there, but she's been dressing up as a snowman. There's lots of role plays, and it's a very dynamic area, and the children do speak English. So, as I mentioned earlier, a teacher has two roles. She's mediator between the resources, the children, and the language. So, in a way, it's kind of play tutoring, and a planner in the sense that she organises and resources the space. If she's a parachute teacher, then it's really important that she or he works with the classroom teacher, who will be the person who's responsible for ensuring that there is time for play, which of course this is what they will do, because if the Ella is part of um, a room, a pre-primary room, it will have areas already, and that will be part of the pre-primary teacher's approach to learning, and so she will be providing time for children to engage in free play. So when you're a parachute teacher, you need to work alongside a pre-primary teacher. I don't have much longer, so I've got to keep going. Now, if you work in a language institute, of course, it's not quite as easy. You don't go into the children's classroom. So what can happen is that you can set up mini centres with a variety of resources which the children have experienced in English with you. And you could have these resources available when the children come into the classroom, and maybe for the first 5 or 6 minutes, and then you start your English session. Or you can have it sometime in the middle of your English session. And this works particularly well when English sessions in language institutes are slightly longer. They can be up to an hour, sometimes 2.5 hours. I know that in British Council schools, they often have sessions for 2.5 hours on a Saturday morning. Yep. So, just reading the comments there. So, what kind of resources then do we need to make sure that the children have access to? Well, much of our teaching is around the visual, flashcards, any games that we might have used with the children, which we might have made or bought somewhere, but we've used them with the children. A large dice is a real favourite. The children throw the dice, they say the number, and then they jump or they clap, or they love it. It's a very simple game, but it's fantastic. And of course, they're developing all sorts of numeracy skills there. Folders with pictures and drawings which the children might have done, or photographs which we might have taken of the children doing things, but normally representative of the language, the target language which they're learning. There'll be picture books or story cards which the children can sequence or retell to each other. There'll be story props where children can dress up. You saw there the child who was dressing up like a snowman. She had a hat and a coat. It's part of a story about a snowman getting dressed. The English puppet is also very popular. Omar, no, this is for pre-primary children from 3 to 6. Okay. It's absolutely, Jennifer. They do really what you've done with them in your teacher-led activities during circle time. And of course, songs and posters, you saw a child retelling Incy Wincy Spider with the spider, but it's very typical to have posters on the wall, and the children really enjoy pointing and retelling the rhyme or the song which they know in English. So really, it's anything that you've used with in your teacher-led activities. As long as you have used English with the resource with the children, they will associate that resource with English, and they'll use English too. So they use English to label. There's a lot of labeling. There's a lot of of saying what they can see in a picture on a picture book page or whatever. They often they'll also ask each other questions, because many of the game-like activities that you will use with the children will involve questions like, is it a? No, it isn't. Yes, it is. So these kinds of things. They will confirm and negate. So yes, it is. No, it isn't. They will even correct each other, and I've observed children correcting each other's English, and that's again a very natural part of interacting with peers in English. Thanks, Joan. 5 more minutes. So yes, and they play in the area. So I have 5 more minutes, and I just want to say, just want to round up by saying that how it works. Well, because we start by focusing on the language that they need to engage with the resource, they then play in the Ella and they practice and feel comfortable about it. And then they come back and it's a kind of spiral that moves from being teacher-led to child-initiated, teacher-led to child-initiated. And it keeps going, and the children learn English, acquire English, grow and develop in English through the interaction between child-led and teacher-led, or child-initiated and teacher-led play. So I'll just finish. When they're organised and resourced to coordinate with teacher-led activities, they are extremely effective and age-appropriate means of facilitating opportunities to exploit the English being taught during formal English sessions. And this comes from some research which I was involved in. And I think Joan will be putting up a handout which I've created for you with some links that you might find interesting. So any questions? We've got about 3 minutes, I think. I hope. Margaret, recommendations for English learners at international schools. They're hearing so need extra support. I'm afraid that's really not my area, Margaret. I'm very much a foreign language in a foreign language context where I'm supporting teachers who have 30 minutes to an hour a week with their children. With English learners in international schools, if they're coming from they're not strong in English, then they're going to need opportunities to engage with peers who can speak English. But that would be a natural thing in international schools anyway. So yeah, I don't have a lot really. Sorry, Margaret. Any other questions? Extra tips for EFL at preschool. Extra tips in what way, Sandra? I think if you are using game-like activities with your children, and if you're able to collaborate with your pre-primary teacher, if that's what you're able to do, you go into the pre-primary school, then set up an Ella is my tip. Any other questions? So, Sophia, can Ellas be also used in primary? Yes, I think they can if if they are allowed or if they are given the opportunity to play. Because what often happens with the move from pre-primary to primary is very much, in fact, a lot of their independence and their autonomy is taken away from them. And they're sitting in rows, at least in Portugal. They're sitting in rows and they don't play in that sense. So this works when the children's area, the learning space is set up for play. Yeah. What's the best duration for a teacher-led session? Well, I would say short periods of time more regularly. So maybe 20 to 30 minutes, 4 or 5 times a week is absolutely fantastic. But it's not possible often. Rebecca, make sure that there are literacy materials. Yes, absolutely. And I don't know if you're talking, Rebecca, if you're in responding to Margaret there. But yes, and literacy materials are, picture books. They can be plastic letters, plastic numbers, story sequencing cards. Those will all develop children's literacy. Yeah. Sophia, I think we might be having to stop soon, Joan. I'm very conscious of the time.
Yes, we have to wind down. So if you have any additional questions, I think, is there any contact information? There you go. Yeah. You can email Sandie if you have additional
Write me an email.
questions. I also posted a link to Sandie's handout. Mhm.
Thank you.
And
Thank you,
thank you
Joe.
so
Thank you.
much for your presentation. It was
Thank you for
wonderful,
listening.
and the examples you gave made it really, um, I think, made it seem like for teachers, I can do this. Like this is something that, I can create, and I know that. Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Excellent.
So thank you for that.
Excellent.
And everyone, let's
Yeah. Thank
applause
you
for
very much.
Sandie. I know it's virtual and she won't hear it, but maybe she can read it in the chat box. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise
Okay.
with us. We really appreciate it.